Welcome to Millennium Counseling Center's podcast, where each week we go in depth into all things mental health, addiction recovery, and being our healthiest and happiest self. Enjoy. Okay, so we're back, and Derek, kind of our next conversation, we've been checking in a little bit about the overall experience of 3A, both on kind of how we are seeing it from our lens, and also kind of what we're hearing from our clients and the different feedback that we've been getting over, almost a decade and a half from hundreds of clients. So, what is your overarching experience walking somebody through the program, and maybe how is that different than just being an individual therapist for somebody? That's more in a once a week kind of cadence.
I think that the word that comes to mind most is support. I think that, as you develop a, working relationship with kind of somebody you see once a week or something like that, I think that takes time to build that rapport and that closeness. And I think because of the intensity of the program and the frequency, and additionally the multiple ways of being in contact, I think it just really speeds up the process and kind of helps us get to a place where we feel very comfortable with them and they feel very comfortable with us. I think the other thing is that I think that they probably get to know us better. And so as they're also getting to know us better, they feel more comfortable and are able to open up about things, are able to get into kind of deeper conversations. And I think the really important part is that if there is something that comes up that is important, or even a crisis type situation, that it's much easier for them to reach out to us and talk to us about it because of the kind of how quickly we can get to have a more closer working relationship with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess also the thing that, because so many people are coming out of primary treatment, the getting sober part has already kind of figured itself out. And now individuals are really wanting to align with somebody on our team or somebody to really walk through the next phase of recovery. And whether it's kind of how to be sober or how to be healthy, or more positive or optimistic at work, at home, in their own life with their kids. And I think that there's more nuance to that. And I think, to your point, having a deeper connection with somebody right away kind of allows you to get to those more personal things that are happening in these individuals' lives.
Yeah, and I think that, you kind of hit on this, but I think that the intricacies of sobriety are, there's the piece of abstinence, which is necessary. You need to have abstinence to really move forward and be truly in recovery, but abstinence does not equal recovery. And I think that, what we're able to do is help them understand that. And I think that abstinence is often driven by trying to avoid the consequences of not being abstinent. I think that recovery, which is really just about how you're living your life and the type of human being you are and kind of how you navigate through your day, I think that's really where a lot of the benefit comes in. And so if you look at kind of the absence of consequences and the addition of benefits, I think that to really find that, people really need to truly understand what recovery is versus just not engaging in the behaviors that they have in the past that have caused them problems.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the pitfalls of coming out of primary treatment is, hey, look, I know how to be sober, right? I'm sober. And one of the analogies that I use with a lot of clients is people at the highest level of all sports know how to do their thing, but they all have coaches. Shohei Ohtani has a hitting coach, has a pitching coach. Back in the day, with the Cubs, John Lester, he was the best pitcher in Major League Baseball, and he had a coach. It wasn't because he didn't know how to throw the baseball, but it was just the nuances of how to look at the different scenarios of pitch counts or batters or scenarios. And that's really, for us, kind of very similar, I think, where somebody may know how to stay sober, but it's really the nuances of kind of how to navigate this situation, or if I'm going to be here, what do I do? And how do I kind of not repeat the same kinds of ways that I may have done it when I was using?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that because we have a deep understanding of what recovery looks like, we are not just repeating and going over the same things that they've already learned. We have an understanding that, again, particularly if they're coming out of a primary treatment, that they have a good understanding of a very good understanding of all of this. But typically, as great as any treatment center might be, it's impossible to prepare for what life looks like afterwards because there's too many twists and turns. And I think that as we navigate through them with them and help them learn the important things and pick out what they need to be careful of and what they need to be aware of, I think it helps them to understand that even though they're most of the way there, there's still some things that can be learned and some things that can be understood. And we can help them understand those things better and be there kind of with them to see those things and to work through them in a healthy way.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you and I, in different words, are saying the same thing, twists and turns, however you want to describe that. What would you say some of those are? What are you hearing from people that's like, oh, wow, here I am again, or here's this situation, and I want to apply sobriety, I want to apply recovery, I want to apply what I've learned in treatment, and then how does that relate to kind of specifically being in 3A, working so closely with somebody on our team, how does that ultimately help them navigate that specific moment?
I think a big one is relationships. I think that how they interact with people once they come home or once they're kind of back into their lives. I think one of the hard things for people in early recovery is that sometimes you are still essentially paying the costs of past behaviors, even though you've changed the way you're living your life and you're changing, kind of how you're operating. There's still some fallout from the past. And I think that can be frustrating for people because they've made all these changes and are doing all this great work. And then they're still getting some reactions from people that are based on what has happened in the past because people either still have feelings about it that haven't worked out or there's resentments or whatever that is. I think that one of the things that I always tell people is that whoever created the rules of addiction and recovery did us a favor because it's not a one for one trade off, meaning that if you drank for 10 years, it doesn't take 10 years to regain trust. It moves faster than that, but it doesn't move fast enough for any of us. We want to make these changes and be living our lives differently and then have everybody understand that and react in that way. But it does take time. And I think a lot of it really revolves around trust. And the only way to rebuild trust is to be trustworthy. And I think that's, one of the main challenges with other people.
Yeah, I would say that, there's almost like a dual recovery happening. There's working on yourself and also helping other people around you heal from the things that happened before. That's definitely one of the key areas that I'm working with people on is kind of how to recognize other people's kind of reactions to you. And then ultimately, how do you turn that inward to you to be like, okay, how do I want to show up right now? How do I not react in a way that shuts them down or pushes them away or shows them I'm not open to kind of working through whatever there still may be to kind of get back to the trust?
Another challenge, I think, is that for most people who were working with, they had become very good at creating a narrative of what they wanted people to see them as and how they were living their life, whether it's around honesty or success or in relationships. And so say they become very good at creating a narrative and they know how to make things look like they are doing the things that they want people to think that they're doing. And then the challenge is they come out of recovery and they're actually living this way. They're actually living that narrative and it looks very similar to the narrative that they had created. And so that's confusing for the other people around them because we had done such a good job of kind of creating the story that we wanted people to see because we were smart enough to know what that would look like. And then when you actually are living that way, and there's still some doubt and some fear and those things coming from other people, I think that that can be really hard. And the main thing that I often tell people is to say, living a narrative is much easier than creating a narrative. If you want people to think you're sober, be sober. If you want people to think you're honest, be honest. If you want people to think you're reliable, be reliable. It's much easier to do that if you think the amount of work that it takes to be dishonest, but have people think you're honest, or be using and have people think you're sober. There's so much work that goes into that. The amount of work that goes into actually doing those things is amazingly less. It's less amount of work.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if this is so particular to 3A, but one of the things that I am trying to help people kind of navigate is that narrative of, I'm okay or I'm doing well, is often kind of confusing for the people around you because if you're so okay now, and it's only been 40 days or it's only been 50 days, that seems almost too easy, right? So one of the things that I feel like is also important in that repair building is to not kind of be so stuck in I'm okay or everything's okay, but learning how to let people know that like I'm navigating stuff and it's not always easy. And so kind of learning how to kind of lean into some of those uncomfortable conversations of, hey, look, I'm sober and I'm continuing to follow this path, but I'm anxious today, right? Or I had a additional thoughts of using today, and how that is actually probably more helpful for rebuilding trust in relationships than saying, I'm okay, and then dealing with it on your own.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of fear around being honest about those things. I think that these are typically people they care about and they have close relationships, whether it's parents or spouses or partners. And I think they don't want them to worry about them, right? So they sometimes hold that stuff in. And one of the things that I think is really helpful about when people are going through the program is they can have those honest conversations with us and they can let us know that they're kind of struggling with a couple of things. And then we can help them figure out how to talk to people around that and how to present that in a way that's not going to be filled with fear or worry but is really just being authentic, and people can see that. That's the thing is people can sense authenticity and they can sense when you're being real, because oftentimes authenticity means being vulnerable or showing some things that aren't necessarily what the other person wants to hear. But to your point, I think that's much more valuable when it comes to the folks that you have relationships with is, when you can be honest about those things while still putting them at ease to say that they're not in, immediate danger, but that it is a struggle is helpful for people. And when they see that vulnerability, I think it helps them feel closer.
Totally. And again, one of the reasons why I feel like that's something we can help people with is because we're talking to them every day. It's one on one. We're able to kind of really get into the specifics of what that's like for them and help kind of them work through the logistics of how to do that with all of the attention on them. And then to be able to follow up with them the next day or that night over a phone call or a text to see how it went. Because it really is about kind of giving them all of the tools and support around kind of the variety of things that are going to be helpful. And again, that's that individualized care and being able to just kind of tease out the specifics of what's going to be most helpful for that person.
Yeah, I think the frequency and the amount of time is a really important piece. If you just think about how we interact with people in general, socially, if you see a friend once a week, it takes a little time to kind of catch up and see how you're doing. And then maybe at some point, if you spend enough time with them, you'll get into a deeper, more important conversation. But usually the first part of that is spent just kind of with kind of history of what has happened and the events that are taking on in your life. The same thing is true when working with people in recovery, because most of us have closer relationships with the people that we live with and our friends, and part of that is because we don't have to keep going through that initial intro every time you're talking to them. They know exactly what's going on in your life, so it's easier to get to some of those deeper, more important issues. I think the same thing is true when people are going through our program, because we're seeing them daily and with so much frequency. We don't need to spend a lot of time on what has happened over the last 5 days. We're just talking about what has happened in the last 20 hours. And so we can get through that, and then we can get back into really digging into some of the deeper things and the things that are going to really be more helpful for them and are going to be more important for them than just us understanding what's going on in their life, but really what's going on in their head.
Yeah. Well, and I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a possible 3A client and they're like, we're going to talk every day. What could possibly happen, right, between noon on a Tuesday and 11 a.m. on a Wednesday? 23 hours. And again, this is so unfamiliar to that normal process that people have, right? Where it's like they think it's just about catching up, whereas the benefit of the program is not going over what happened every hour of your day, but what's happening within you while that's happening so that you can build confidence in yourself, in your recovery, and really working on kind of all of the additional things that are going on in your life.
Yeah, and I think that's the other, the feedback that we've gotten around the program is that people like to use these words, but it is truly individualized and specialized for each person. two different people who go through our program are going to have very different experiences because it's going to be based on where they are and what they're dealing with in their life and the things that are unique to them. And I think that that ability to really have, their treatment plan curated to their individual, not just their circumstances of their life, but their personality. I mean, I know that the way that I explain something to one person, the same topic might be completely different to another person. And the only reason why I'm able to do that, or why we're able to do that, is because we've gotten to know that person. We understand how they think, we know how their mind works, and we're able to kind of put it in the terms that make sense to them. Whereas we may explain that same thing to someone else completely differently because they're built differently. And that's the thing about all of us, is we all share and receive information differently. And I think that that's one of the things that we do really well, is we're able to kind of figure that out, kind of how people like to receive and share information. And then we play in that area with them. We talk to them in those ways, as opposed to just some way that we always explain something to someone.
Yeah. And I think too, one of the things that we identified early was that because we created the program and we're the lead on so many of the people that are going through it, we're any potential new 3A client or family member that's interested in learning more about it, we're spending a lot of time in the beginning kind of making the first call back, right? Calling somebody back, asking them questions, really figuring out what they're looking for. And that's when the process starts. And I think that's important for anyone that's kind of interested in learning about this program to know, is that Derek and I are calling people back. We're kind of asking the questions that are kind of really figuring out what somebody is interested in doing in their life and in the recovery, and telling them kind of how it's going to go. Because from that first call is we're trying to align and create a partnership to help somebody get to a better place in their life. And I think that that's just an important thing that feel like that we kind of started really early on, is that this is not just about somebody signing up and then they start to work with us. We really kind of, before someone's even said, yeah, I want to do it, we're letting them know, hey, this is what it's going to look like. And we're getting to know you from that first call.